Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Weekend Waypoints, a production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy. As always, we're going to go through Friday's action around the SEC. We're going to take a little peek ahead at Saturday's games. But first, I have to remind you this episode and every episode of Weekend Waypoints brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Really appreciate our friends over there being on board with this little show we do 3 times a week, every weekend here on Weekend Waypoints. Another good Friday around the SEC. Not necessarily the most successful Friday. It took a number of losses, but there were a lot of difficult games. And whenever you play difficult games, you're going to take some losses along the way. And then the hope is that you grow from them. And I think that's kind of where those SEC teams that took losses are at right now. I think that's kind of the way you got to think of it. One of those teams, by the way, is involved in our game of the day, and that is, as I pull it up here, get rid of the ad. Nebraska 9, Auburn 8 in 10 innings. That is our game of the day. A tough loss for Auburn, just the way it went down. Nebraska gets 3 in the top of the 8th to tie the game. It previously kind of looked like this was going to be not a runaway necessarily, but Auburn was pretty firmly in control of this game. I got a good start from Jake Marciano. Looked like they were kind of cruising in the late innings, but then Nebraska goes for 3 in the 8th inning. Gets 4 in the top of the 10th when we get to extra innings there. And then Auburn scores 3 in the bottom of the 10th and comes up just a little bit short there, leaving a couple of runners on base. The big hit for Nebraska, of course, in the 10th inning, a Will Jeske 3-run homer that ends up being the difference maker there. One big swing kept Auburn from being able to come all the way back. And as we get a look over here at the stats, I think the thing that stands out to me is that you had some tough outings from some guys that are reliable, right? Garrett Brewer and Ryan Hetzler both gave up runs in this game, and that's something that I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of. I think both of those guys are going to be really good for Auburn in the bullpen this year. I think you forced me to bet them. I'm going to tell you that those are 2 guys that are going to be reliable all season long, and that yesterday was just kind of a blip on the radar for them. That's going to be my bet. Both those guys have been pretty solid so far. Jet Johnston also gave up some runs, although one of them was an unearned run, and he's been good so far this season as well. So a little bit of a leaky bullpen for Auburn, which hadn't really necessarily been a concern so far this season, but it was certainly on Friday. And kudos to Nebraska too. I mean, you got to give credit to Nebraska. They've proven that they're a pretty good team. You knew this series was going to be a difficult one for Auburn, just Nebraska, a quality opponent. And that turned out to be the case. You see here in the Auburn box score, of course, Chris Rimbert returning 0 for 3 with a walk. He left 4 guys on base. Obviously not the return in terms of performance that you were looking for, but that's really kind of beside the point. The big news, of course, is that he's back, and it's just going to take some time. It's just going to take some time for him to be back into the swing of things, get his swing back. That's not something that happens really overnight. So I was never going to bet on him kind of immediately being back to his 100% normal self. That just not really necessarily realistic. So 0 for 3 on the day, but that's okay. The rest of this weekend series should now be fascinating. Auburn's gonna have to work hard not to drop this series. Nebraska already showed last weekend in Arlington that it can play well at the end of weekends. So we will see how that transpires. All right, got some comments waiting. Let's get over to those comments. Ace Man says, good morning and howdy from Arlington. Howdy, Ace Man. I've got Jack DeLongshaw and Darren Vaught I paused there because I was trying to remember if I heard this correctly. But yeah, they are going from – they're calling the games in Frisco, and then those guys are heading over to Arlington afterwards to take in the A&M game this evening. So D1 Baseball, Aaron Fitz there all weekend, but D1 Baseball will be all over that night game tonight. So that's exciting there. Good morning, Scott. I see him there. Daniel Gomez with a Hail State. Speaking of, Hunter Johnson says, do you think this matchup game can work for State all year where they don't have a set 9 guys in the lineup? It's a good question. I would say, I don't know if this means my answer is yes or no, but I promise I'm giving you a straight answer. I don't think it's going to continue to be this. I think eventually they are going to um, I think eventually they are going to settle on something like 9 or 10. Like very few teams have a totally set 9. They usually have 10 or 11. They kind of cycle through. I think eventually, excuse me, I think eventually State will settle on that. So again, I don't know if that's an answer yes or no to your question, but I just don't think it's going. I just don't think the question will end up being relevant in the end because I do think State will eventually settle on a smaller group of guys. And so I guess if I try to answer it a little more directly, I think no, it can't continue to work, but I think it's not going to have to. Like I think eventually State will settle on a core they like and they throw out there every weekend and every game of the weekend. So um, yeah, so I think that's ultimately where I come down on that one. All right, let's see. LSU, Carl Dunn. LSU did what they needed to do to avoid a bad day in the conference. Evans will get this starting thing down. 10K and 3 walks, and then how about SC? Yeah, on LSU, Case and Evans, some good stuff. 10 strikeouts. And I thought he deserved a lot of credit for not letting that start get away from him yesterday. I think there's a scenario where, he gives up 2 runs in 5 innings, I think it was. I think there's a scenario where that inning or that start snowballs on him a little bit and he doesn't escape it, and he ends up going 3 or 4 innings instead of 5. So I do think even though it seems like a low bar to clear, I do think he deserves credit for not letting that start just totally get away from him. So kudos there. And Gavin Guidry was awesome in relief. We'll talk about that. And yeah, South Carolina, I talk about out of nowhere, 7-0 win over Clemson in a rivalry game. I didn't see that coming. I don't know that anyone did. Josh Gunther was awesome in that start. We'll talk about him when we talk about pitcher of the day candidates. So the rest of that series is going to be fascinating too, because it would be very college baseball for a team like South Carolina that has looked as dead in the water as they looked, losing to Queens in the midweek to then go and take a series off of Clemson. Like that would just be very college baseball. So we'll see. Ben Tramer with a comment on weekends when you would typically pre-record, just do it live at a time convenient for you. Won't require you to announce what time beforehand. It will be a pleasant surprise for those that see it. That's actually the way I did it in previous years, Ben. I would just kind of I would just record when it's convenient for me. We found as a group, so working with people who work on the marketing side here for D1 baseball, that we made the decision that it would be preferable to just set a time every single time. So we'll see. We'll continue to, I understand the pre-records last weekend weren't ideal, but we will continue to iterate and figure out what's best here. But for now, we're committed to 10:30 Eastern, 9:30 Central. We're going to see that out for now. But I do appreciate the feedback because genuinely I want to do what is going to be best for obviously myself, but also for an audience. Like we're doing this to bring an audience to it. So we are definitely open to feedback on that. We're just trying to find the right answers. Hi there, Todd. A cup of Joe. BB in the house. Go Cats. Go Gators. Put some respect on Liam Peterson's name. Yeah. Another good start for Liam Peterson. He's been a lot better the last 2 weeks than he was the first weekend, and you could see why. In a start like yesterday's, you can see why scouts are so high on him and see him as right behind. Although now with Cam Fluke's injury, maybe he's ahead of Cam Fluke in the pecking order, right? But they see him in a group with Cam Fluke from Coastal Carolina and Jackson Flora from UC Santa Barbara as like one of the top arms in the draft. So another good start for Liam Peterson there. Hunter Johnson says, look like Ryan McPherson for State has emerged as a real dude on Friday night. Yeah, definitely. That transition, when you consider that there are other transitions, bullpen to starter transitions happening in the SEC, and some haven't gone as well. Haven't gone as well as others necessarily. His is one that has gone really, really well. It looks like State has a real guy at the front of the rotation. Yesterday's start was excellent. Gave him 7 strong innings against a good Arizona State offense. That's an offense that can put up runs in bunches, and he avoided it. Todd Harris also says Jackson Jelkin is a dude. That is correct. The Cats' weekend rotation is looking great. Big things coming in SEC play. Yeah, you're just gonna have to get the offense going a little bit. The offense ever since Tyler Bell went down has been fairly runs have been tough to come by. But the Cats continue to do so mostly in wins. They've taken a couple losses here and there, but as long as you're struggling offensively but still winning, you'll accept that, right? But certainly the weekend rotation has lived up. The Jelkin, Cleaver, Harris rotation has been really, really good, and Jelkin looks like he's living up to all those preseason expectations. Scott Hankowski says Tennessee losing Vitello and Anderson is going to be tough, like what happened to A&M last year. Yeah, that's a good that's a good comp there in terms of what could possibly happen. Just like a transition when you have a very accomplished head coach who is a singular personality, shall we say, and then you take that coach out and Frank Anderson too, and then it creates this big vacuum, and you can fill that vacuum with accomplished coaches and accomplished guys and talented guys and guys with a lot of potential, but sometimes it's just not quite the same. And I think we're seeing with A&M that year 2 is maybe trending in the right direction. And so with Tennessee, I do think there is a scenario. I think this is kind of the point you're making, Scott. Like, I think there is a scenario with Tennessee where there are some lumps this year, and you're just going to have to wear it a little bit. And then maybe as this coaching staff kind of gets its feet under it, maybe subsequent years end up being a little bit better than that first year out. We'll find out as time goes on, but I do think that is definitely on the table as a possibility. I see you there, Ben, and thanks for watching since I've been here at D1. Ryan says Auburn-Nebraska takeaways. Marciano and Carey are dudes. McCrane brothers are a problem. Yeah. Auburn needs rumored to be healthy. Both bullpens look shaky. Should be an exciting next 2 games. Yeah, Nebraska's bullpen also, Auburn had the struggles in the bullpen yesterday, but Nebraska's bullpen all weekend last weekend was kind of a roller coaster ride. Now, they did okay in the Florida State game, but I think that is in part because they got out to a big lead, and they were protecting like a 7, 8, 9 run lead, whatever. 7, 8 run lead. And then that's obviously easier to protect than if you're trying to hold on late in a game and you're just holding on for dear life. But so yeah, Nebraska certainly that is an area of their game that is going to need shoring up the bullpen. So you're 100% right there. I'm actually not convinced that. I think the bullpen looked shaky for Auburn yesterday. I'm actually not convinced that is a problem yet. We could talk about it as time goes on if they continue to have issues. But I actually came out of last weekend at Globe Life feeling pretty good about Auburn's bullpen. And I'm willing to bet on yesterday being just one of those days. We'll find out. But with Nebraska, I am pretty convinced that is going to be a struggle for them. Your other points are well taken too. The McCrane brothers have been really good, particularly Brandon McCrane. He was, the guy who spent most of the time at second base when Rembert was out, and I wrote about him last weekend because he's been huge for them, filling in that gap. And it's not just that he's performing in terms of things like batting average and whatnot, but also the way he plays. He plays really hard. He takes extra bases. He's aggressive. He's confident. Like, he plays with a confidence in his game, and I think it's cool that he's a bit of a dying breed in college baseball, and that he's a dude who took a non-injury red shirt. And most of those guys who take non-injury red shirts start looking around thinking, is this going to be the best place for me? Do I need to go somewhere else? But he stuck it out at Auburn, and that meant a lot to Butch Thompson, because I asked Butch Thompson about him, and he was like, yeah, it meant a lot to me that he stuck around, and had confidence in us that we were the right, sticking with us was the right thing to do, and for his career. And I think that's paying off. And then, yeah, Marciano, I wrote about him last weekend too. I agree with you. I think he's a real guy for them. We'll see how high his ceiling is, and then once we get into SEC play, it'll obviously be a different test. But so far, so good for him. And yeah, Dylan Carey. I think obviously this is an SEC show, not a Big Ten show, so I'll make it brief on Dylan Carey. But I think he's got a chance to be the Big Ten Player of the Year. Like he looks that good now. To win Big Ten Player of the Year, Nebraska is going to have to continue to be pretty good. I think that's going to be the case. Obviously, I don't know that roster as well as I know SEC rosters, but they certainly looked pretty competent to me. And Dylan Carey is a big part of that for sure. There's two pieces. I got distracted by this because I saw it as I was talking. But Aceman says, "I'm curious if year one Tennessee will catch fire like the Aggies did last year, but then crash and burn when running into the Yankees of a team that were the Missouri Tigers." That is still last year. I mean, I hope Aggies watching this understand, and you're able to laugh about it a little bit now, because that is the absolute funniest result that could have happened last year. Was an A&M team that absolutely caught fire and was like, we were just assuming they were going to make the postseason at that point. Like, okay, yeah, they've got Missouri, they'll probably sweep that, and to just totally fall on your face at home was just like I felt bad for him on some level, but also it was just kind of the funniest result that could have happened at that particular time. So well done, Ace Man, with those the old shot and then chaser here on your comments. I love that. Canes Cats Heat 305. What did you see from our game last night? He's referring to the Florida Miami game. Closer than the score. It was 7-2. Closer than the score suggests. I think the fact that I liked from a Miami standpoint that they kept at it against Liam Peterson and were able to force a no decision for him and stay in the game through the middle innings. I just ultimately thought it was a little bit. I just thought it was a matter of Florida in the bullpen with Barbary. I think was a little more solid, right? I think that's what it ultimately came down to is, and I think that's going to be a thing with Florida all year, is that you think you're doing well by scratching a couple runs against Peterson or Aiden King, and then so you think you're doing well, and then they bring in some other dude from the bullpen, and it's just a shutdown situation. Like, their strength is going to continue to be their pitching staff, and I think that's kind of what I saw yesterday. Like, I didn't think Miami. Yes, they made some mistakes, and I didn't see every out of this. I was at my own game, covering my own game, so I'm not going to pretend like I was locked in on it. But it seemed like Miami was in that game, and it just kind of got away from them a little bit. So I think that's going to be a competitive next couple of games. Daniel Gomez asked, "Do you think Charlie Foster pitches against UCLA?" Yes, I still think that's who they end up. It's a TBA, but I think that's ultimately who they're still going to go with if you made me pick. Now, obviously, I don't know. Brian O'Connor could legitimately still be deciding, and probably is. But I think the best version of Mississippi State is one in which Charlie Foster kind of figures it out a little bit. So I think they're going to continue to give him a lot of chances to prove that he is the guy that they think he can be. Amanda Adams says, Roll Tide, Amanda. Good luck to Zane today. Oh, my good buddy Joe. He says, "Finally catching you live, Joe. Currently in Globe Life, hoping we can play some ball today." Yeah, certainly yesterday, not the best day for Tennessee. Just a professional, I say this respectfully, professional beatdown from UCLA, where Tennessee kind of made it a game, and then UCLA just kind of like rolled its sleeves up and was like, "All right, fine. I guess we're gonna have to do this." And they did. UCLA just seems like a very professional outfit. Yeah, so it, and I think that's just kind of what it's going to look like. Like with the UCLA A&M game tonight, I think A&M is going to be in that game, but the difference I think is just going to be that UCLA is just such a buttoned up outfit. Like they know who they are, they know what they've got. They don't panic. They don't get too high or too low. They just seem very, very professional in there. Now they're still going to get beat because this is baseball. They're still going to lose some games. They lost to San Diego State the other night, right? But especially on the weekends, like I just think they're so impressive and buttoned up in the way they go about their business. Canes Cats, he's asked which games I was at. I'm in Frisco, so I saw Oregon State and Houston. Dax Whitney, spoiler alert, was great again. And then Alabama took down Iowa yesterday, 12-2. Alabama's offense looked pretty good. I think there's some real depth in that offense. Around LeBron, like I'm still waiting to see if like another like a a Robin to LeBron's Batman emerges at some point. Like, I'd like to see that. But right now it looks like they've got this whole handful of guys that are really quality offensive players. I just kind of am curious to see if someone emerges to be like kind of like last year you had like a Will Hodo had a really good year, kind of to support LeBron in the lineup. Like, is there a guy like that? And yes, to answer your question, Kane Scott, Jason Torres is still on Alabama. He's one of the guys who's a candidate to be that guy that is the second fiddle to LeBron in the lineup. He's off to a tough start, though. He's hitting below 200 at this point of the season. Ben Tramer says, how would this UCLA team do versus the Cole Rasmussen team? That is a really interesting question, because that team obviously would pitch it really, really well. But I like this UCLA offense better. It would be one heck of a series, because, I think you have like a little bit of an immovable object versus an irresistible force situation, where that rotation, with Bauer and Cole in particular, just so dominant. But this offense for UCLA is scary. They can really just put it on you in the blink of an eye. And it's not just Rock Chalowski. We saw that yesterday. I mean, Will Gasparino was the guy yesterday with 2 home runs. They just have a lot of guys that can beat you. Daniel Gomez asks, what do you think about Vandy's start to the season? I mean, yesterday he took a tough loss. UC Irvine's good. That's going to happen. Not really too worried about that. I've been impressed by the physicality for sure. How could you not? I mean, they already have hit about a third of the home runs they hit all of last season, and we're 15% of the way through the season or something like that, 10 to 15%. So that's, we'll see how real that is. But so far so good for Vanderbilt, because I have a high level of conviction they're going to continue to pitch well. And if they can continue to pitch well and they can be as physical as they've been in the first, 2 weeks plus of the season, that's going to be a tough customer in the SEC for sure. I agree with you. Canes Cats Eats. Texas did look really good. They beat Coastal Carolina 8-1, just kind of ran away with it. Ruger Riojas, really good start for him. He looks like a better pitcher this season than what he's been. Looks like Max Wiener and he have kind of gotten in the lab together. His stuff has taken a jump. He's dominating games now, as opposed to last year where he was just kind of almost like a game manager quarterback, right, kind of guy, where he would just kind of manage the game and he'd give your team a chance to win, right? Ruger Riojas looks like a different dude this time around, just based on what we saw yesterday. I thought that was really, really impressive. I'm excited to go back and maybe get a chance to watch his start from yesterday and see what he's doing differently, because certainly it does appear he's doing some things differently. All right, let's get to hitter or player and pitcher of the day, or hitter of the day, if you will, with my super high-tech Google Sheets. All right, here we go. Andrew Purdy for Alabama in that 12-2 win over Iowa, 3 for 5. He's one of the names who could emerge as a guy who's a second fiddle for Alabama. Rob Vaughn said in the postgame, and Andrew Purdy's just a freshman. Rob Vaughn said in the postgame, and I'm paraphrasing, he's not our most famous freshman, but he's a guy that in a lot of our scrimmages before the season, he was batting fourth. Like, there's real power there. But a 3 for 5 day yesterday for him, perhaps getting going a little bit. It's been a slowish start for him this season. We'll come back to Daniel Jackson, but Trey Phelps for Georgia, 3 for 4. That is in Georgia's, I have the score here, 16-6 win over Oakland. Chris Newstrom in a losing effort for Tennessee, 3 for 4 with a triple and a home run. Tristan Becerra for Ole Miss, also in a losing effort against Baylor. Ole Miss lost that game 6-5 in 10 innings. If you are wondering, if you watched that Ole Miss game, I also did not know that they were going to use the runner on second base in extra innings rule like they do in MLB. That was a surprise to me too when that happened. Apparently that is something they agreed upon before the tournament as a rule to kind of mitigate, games going on forever and ever, which I get. I was just kind of surprised that they did it, to be honest with you. So Tristan Becerra, 2 home runs and 3 runs batted in, but a losing effort there. Baylor with a 6-5 win. Brendan Brock for Oklahoma. Oklahoma beat Gonzaga 14-4. Not the best start for Cam Johnson, but still plenty solid. But Brendan Brock offensively just 1 for 2, but also walked twice, so got on base 3 times, hit a home run, drove in 3 runs, scored 3 runs. Just a classic like box score stuffer kind of stat line there where he did a lot of different things. Missouri, a couple of guys. Missouri 11-5 winner over North Dakota State. Obviously, Missouri has still yet to beat a team that we think has really any realistic chance at being a postseason team. I guess North Dakota State could win the Summit League. I'm not going to pretend like I know how good they are compared to, say, Oral Roberts in that conference. But you know what I mean. But when I say that Missouri hasn't beaten a postseason team yet, that being said, like I said the other day, like after starting off with that loss to Mount St. Mary's, they have largely taken care of their business. Jace Woida, 3 for 4 with a walk and 3 runs batted in. Blaze Ward for Missouri, 3 for 4 with a double. Brendan Lawson for Florida in that win over Miami, 7-2 win for Florida over Miami, 3 for 3 with a home run, a hit by pitch, and 3 runs batted in. Continuing buzz. Kyle Peterson said it on the broadcast yesterday of that game that, Brendan Lawson, there's some buzz around him being the first overall pick in the 2027 draft. Now, I think Dax Whitney has a little bit to say about that. So we will see, but certainly he is in that mix, in that conversation. Brandon McCray, and we talked about him just a few minutes ago in Auburn's loss to Nebraska, 2 for 3 with 2 walks, so got on base 4 times. Aiden Robbins for Texas in that win over Coastal Carolina, 3 for 4 with a home run and 3 runs batted in. The home run traveled 466 feet. Robbins said after the game that it was the furthest he's ever hit a ball, and I guess that makes sense because it was 466 feet. Timo Becerra, who is mostly in there for his defense, went 2 for 3 and hit 2 home runs with a walk, 3 runs batted in, 3 runs scored. Impressive day there. But the player of the day is Daniel Jackson for Georgia, 3 for 4 with 2 home runs and 6 runs batted in for Georgia in that win over Oakland. All right, let's flip over to pitcher of the day now. All right, here we go. Tyler Fay of Alabama, really, really solid start for him against Iowa. 6 innings pitched, 5 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. Held his stuff all the way through. His final strikeout was on a 95-mile-an-hour fastball in the 6th inning. So really, really positive stuff there. Looking forward to seeing Zane Adams today for Alabama. Those two there's a lot of optimism about those two at the front of the Alabama rotation. Ryan McPherson, we talked about him, 7 strong innings, gave up just 1 run there for Mississippi State against Arizona State. Cole Gibbler for Arkansas. We haven't talked about this game yet, but UTA 4, Arkansas 3. Concern about the Arkansas lineup. I haven't seen the question yet. Maybe it's waiting for me in the queue, but I thought I might get asked, should we be worried about the Arkansas offense? I am not worried in the grand scheme of things. Like, I think by the time we get to May, I don't think we're going to be asking the questions. But for now, I mean, yeah, like when you consider how much they struggled to score against Arkansas State in the midweek, and now they go into this game against UTA where they were getting shut out until the 9th inning, and they finally woke up a little bit and pushed some runs across and just couldn't quite get it done. So in the short term, yeah, like I do have concerns, because even if you do eventually figure it out, how many losses are you going to take before you get to that point? So, but we'll see. But Cole Gibbler in relief in that losing effort, 3 2/3, just 1 hit allowed, no walks, 5 strikeouts. Jackson Jelkin, we talked about him. That was in a 3-1 win over St. John's for Kentucky. 7 1/3 innings, 2 hits, 1 run. It was unearned with 1 walk and 8 strikeouts. Hunter Elliott for Ole Miss in that start against Baylor. Certainly he did his part there. 5 innings pitched, 2 hits, 1 run, 3 walks, and 11 strikeouts, tied for the most of anybody on this list. Javen Pimental and their win against North Dakota State for Missouri. 5 2/3 innings, 2 hits, 2 runs, just 1 earned, 3 walks, 5 Ks. Liam Peterson, we talked about him. 5 2/3 strong innings, 8 strikeouts. Jackson Barbary came on in relief of him to make it to where Florida just had to use 2 pitchers to get through that Miami win. 3 1/3 scoreless, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. Jake Marciano, a strong start there, 2 runs in 5 innings. It wasn't, like we've discussed, it wasn't until the bullpen came in that things got a little bit sideways on him there. Gavin Guidry for LSU. LSU 5-2 win over Dartmouth. Kason Evans battled through a start where Dartmouth got him for a couple of runs, but Gavin Guidry came on and was really strong. 3 2/3, 1 hit, no runs there in relief. Shane Sadeo for Texas A&M in the win over Coastal, 6 shutout innings. Ruger Riojas, I'm sorry, not over Coastal. Texas A&M in its win over Virginia Tech, 10-0 win in 7 innings for Texas A&M. Shane Sadeo, 6 scoreless innings there, got Texas and Texas A&M crossed up. I'm sure nobody will take offense to that. In the win over Coastal, though, Ruger Riojas, 5 shutout innings, just 1 hit allowed, 1 walk allowed with 11 strikeouts. But the pitcher of the day in part because of just how shocking this result was. Josh Gunther for South Carolina, Wake Forest transfer, with his breakout performance for the Gamecocks, 7 shutout innings, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts. Again, I'm just kind of floored by that result. So Josh Gunther, the pitcher of the day. All right. I got some comments to clean up here. Let's see, make sure I haven't missed anything here. Kane's Cats mentioned a defensive play for Brennan Lawson, and that is going to be the question for him. Like, there's no questions about his offense. Dude can hit. It's going to be, is he like a real third baseman, or does he eventually need to be a first baseman? But if he's a real third baseman, like a guy who can make, really solid, can make all the solid plays and give you some spectacular, that's going to be him answering the question defensively, which is where more of the questions are. Ben says 20 minutes in, how has Joe not said the word Arkansas yet? I knew there was going to be a comment in there waiting, but yeah, not a great day for Arkansas. Definitely not what they were looking for there. That Ole Miss game was a weird game. LOL. This is Mac. He says Baylor wasn't very good, but Ole Miss didn't want to win. Apparently, some games are like that. Like, yeah, like it was just. It was a game I don't want to say gave up on, but just kind of was on the back burner, and I kept pulling it up, and it was just one of those games where Baylor was like, I was just surprised that Baylor was still in it, right? Like, because I saw Baylor on Tuesday, like I saw them in a midweek game, and I thought it was a team Ole Miss is gonna handle. And baseball is baseball; these things happen. But I was surprised to see him hanging in there. Jim in Arlington says Oklahoma's 6th run rule win. Yeah, impressive stuff. I knew Oklahoma was going to be solid or above average offensively. They have exceeded my expectations offensively, and we'll need to see them continue to do it against teams that aren't Gonzaga. No disrespect to Gonzaga, although I guess by saying that I am disrespecting Gonzaga. But they have certainly exceeded my expectations there. All right, scrolling through. Let's see. Ben Tramer with a possible freezing cold take. Gibbler should be Friday, Fisher Saturday, Gackler or Holstaff Sunday. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a scenario where that ends up being the case at some point. If Hunter Dietz, if his return continues to not go particularly well, but I do think they are going to just give Hunter Dietz like a long leash here. But we'll see. But that is certainly. That is certainly on the table. What you laid out is not a crazy assertion. Gunther making his first start too. Yeah, like add that to the list of things that make that a wild result. Thank you for joining, Scott. I see you there. All right. I've been referred to as an Auburn homer. Look, Auburn, Alabama is a lovely place. I wouldn't describe myself as an Auburn homer, though. I just happen to. I saw them in Globe Life, but I don't know that there's no part of me that's a homer. Texas A&M issues our 10th walk last night on the season. We have to control the zone. Unacceptable. I guess Gunther, Traver says, I guess Gunther packed some beakers and Bunsen burners from Wake's facilities before he transferred. Good call there. All right, caught up there. Patrick Yankee, one last thing. He says, great news on Tyler Bell. Could be a boost for the Cats because the pitching looks promising. Yeah, sounds like Tyler Bell is progressing. It sounds an awful lot like he's going to give it a shot at some point. We'll see. We'll ultimately see what ends up being the case there for Tyler Bell. All right, game of the day. We'll get you out of here. We're almost 35 minutes in, so we'll cut you loose. I got to get to the ballpark here in a little bit. UCLA at Texas A&M. Michael Barnett versus Weston Moss on the mound. Just kind of want to see, real quick. I was at their regional. I was not at their super regional. Mark Etheridge was at their super regional. But you're right. I also was at Auburn's regional. Michael Barnett versus Weston Moss in that game, UCLA versus Texas A&M. I'm kind of curious to see how A&M deals with UCLA, and just the right now it looks like UCLA might just be a machine. So looking forward to seeing that. And like I said, well, D1 baseball will be well represented at that game, unless we have some long extra inning stuff here in Frisco, and then my buddies Jack and Darren don't make it over there in time. But of course, we shall see. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Weekend Waypoints, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. Thanks again to Academy Sports and Outdoors for sponsoring this and every episode of Weekend Waypoints. Enjoy the baseball, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow, Sunday, with a fresh episode, 10:30 Eastern, 9:30 Central. I'll talk to y'all then.